Hello，欢迎收听刘轩的 How to 人生学，我是刘轩。在这个节目里，我们讨论心理学、哲学、科学、文学，还有如何把这些知识用在生活里面，来活出最好的自己。有没有一个问题，你其实知道很久，却一直没时间好好问自己呢？许多人生的突破，来自于你是否能够诚实回答几个重要的问题：我为什么在这个世界上？我是否畏惧死亡？我对现在的生活真的心满意足吗？有一本全球畅销的寓言小说，就是从这3个问题开始的。它的书名是《世界尽头的咖啡馆》。这故事很简单，一个在人生路上迷了路的男人，走进了一间偏僻的咖啡馆。在菜单上，他看见了3个问题，改变了他的一生。就是我刚才问的那3个问题。世界尽头的咖啡馆 The Cafe on the Edge of the World，在全球已经售出了数百万册，翻译成超过45种语言，用深入浅出的寓言故事陪伴无数人重新思考人生。而这本书的作者，也就是我们今天来到节目的来宾 John Strelecky。今天我在纽约，他在佛罗里达的家里，我们远距访谈，聊了很多，也聊得很深。我想要了解他为什么能够有勇气离开一个高薪的顾问工作，如何不小心成为了一个畅销作家，而透过他的作品又成为了许多人的心灵导师，而他又如何引导别人为自己回答那几个关键的问题。最后呢，我们也会谈到他全新的续集作品《重返世界尽头的咖啡馆》。如果你想要更了解他自己也有一个英文的 podcast The Cafe on the Edge of the World Podcast， 或上他的网站 johnstrelecky.com。以下的访谈会是全英文，但如果你在我们轩辕文创的 YouTube 频道看这场访谈的话呢，就可以在字幕那里选择中文字幕。也请按下订阅，开启小铃铛，因为以后我们每一集的 Podcast 也都会上 YouTube。那以下就是我与 John Strelecky 的对谈。I hope you enjoy. First of all, welcome to the show, John.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Sean. Great to be here. Great to see you. Great to get a chance to have this conversation.
So you're going to launch your new book in Taiwan, and there's a lot of your readers, a lot of your fans, right? But for people who haven't read your book yet, how would you describe yourself?
That's an interesting one. A couple of words come to mind. First and foremost, I would say I'm an adventurer. I very much view the human experience as a very rare opportunity to play the game of life. And for me, doing the same things every day the same way is very not conducive to my happiness. So I like to see different things. I like to try different things. I like to travel many different places around the world, including Taiwan, which is a beautiful country. So I would say I'm an adventurer for sure. I'm also a father. That's first and foremost. I have an amazing kid who's now 18, so not really a kid anymore. But the joy that I've experienced of being a dad has been one of the greatest joys of my life. And then I guess the reason we're having this conversation is a third part of me is I'm an author, and I take the things that I think and the stories that come through me and I write them down with the hopes that it can in some way help some other people.
I would love to talk to you today because I think you're kind of an accidental expert on finding life's purpose and meaning.
It's true.
For all of our listeners who actually don't know that story, can you just take us through it very briefly?
Yeah, sure. I've had a very interesting, crazy, convoluted background, and I'll jump most parts of it. But after having a dream that I had worked for my whole life, taken away from me just because of something that I had no control over, I sort of started at ground zero and I worked my way up. And then when I was 32 years old, about 5 years into a lucrative career, I was very good at what I did. I was a management consultant, a strategy consultant. But I found that every Friday I'd come home, every Monday I'd leave, and I just wasn't happy. You know, Sean, it was like one of those things where, are you good at what you do? Yeah. Do you get pretty well paid for what you do? Yeah. Do people respect what you do? Yeah. But do you feel like you're fulfilling your purpose in any way, shape, or form? And the answer was no. And I think that's a very interesting point to come to as a human being, because obviously there's tons of other people who don't have those luxuries. They don't have a job that they're good at. Maybe they haven't been given the opportunity, or the environment in which they grow up or live just doesn't provide that opportunity. And so it's a very high-class problem to have. And at the same time, I just felt like if I keep doing what I'm doing 10 years down the line, I'm just going to be that much less happy. And it was kind of crazy. My grandfather passed away. I didn't really know him very well. He lived very far away. But I remember the day that he passed away, my mom called me and told me that. And I remember thinking, and he died in his 80s. And I remember thinking, if I get to my 80s and I keep doing what I'm doing, how will I feel about my life? And the answer was, I wouldn't feel so great. And so that was kind of me embarking on the start of my journey.
A lot of people would kill for a management consulting job. And
Yeah.
in my college, I still remember that was, besides Wall Street, this was the number one thing that people wanted to get into.
Yeah.
And people would say, like, just the frequent flyer miles, man. You're flying all over the place. You're in different places all the time.
Yeah.
And you describe yourself as an adventurer. But how is that? There's a lot of travel involved. There's always working on new cases. There's always new problems to solve. But what about it doesn't make you happy?
Yeah, interesting that you point that out, and that's true. And I think that's one of the things that drew me to it. I just felt that there was something else inside of me. And I think that's one of the unique moments in life, is when you can't even name what the thing is, but you just feel like there's a different path for you to be walking. And are you willing to trust your intuition? Are you willing to trust your instincts? Often it feels like there's a void, it's the unknown. And so here you are on one side of this giant abyss, and the side you're on. You can function well on the side you're on. And across the abyss, you can see another path. And you're thinking, I think that's where I'm supposed to go. That's what my heart tells me. But it just seems like a monumental effort to cross that abyss. And what I've discovered is that when we allow ourselves to take the step into the abyss, we realize that the path is there. It's just that we can't see it until we take that step. And I'm not saying the step is always easy. I'm not saying the path is always easy. But if you feel that kind of calling, there's probably a reason why you're feeling that calling. There is something on the other side of the abyss, which is going to help you, and in all likelihood, probably help other people too.
What you just said reminds me of that scene in The Matrix where Morpheus is in the virtual world and telling Neo, like, take a step off of this ledge and jump and just believe that you can fly, right? So the first time that he takes it off the ledge, he ends up like just smashing into pieces. But what you say is you're looking into the abyss, right? You see something on the other side. You know that there's something more for you, but you do have to step into that abyss, and that makes it very tough. A lot of people are scared, especially when they look back and they're sitting on a really cushy job, right? They are on a promotion path. They could probably make partner someday. There's a lot of sunken cost right here.
Even people who aren't on that great of a trajectory, the human mind fears the unknown more than the known, even if the known isn't that pleasant. And you see that people with relationships that aren't working, but they'll stay in it even though it's not working. They'll definitely do it with jobs that aren't making them feel happy or fulfilled, but they know the job that they're in and they don't know the unknown. And so, a lot of people get stuck on that side of the abyss.
I think I know more people on this side that hasn't taken that step yet. And so I think both of us, we are very fortunate in that we have taken that step, seen some darkness. Right?
For sure.
But then came out on the other side. And now we're on the other side telling people, hey, it's okay. You can do it. You can take that step.
Yeah.
And you've done it through your works. You've done it beautifully through your writing. There's certain things that I think a sense of hope that you really give to people through your writing. But now I'm talking to you as a person, right? How can you tell us, someone who's scared, standing on that ledge, looking into the abyss, how do they overcome that fear? Yeah,
the first thing I would say, and this is one of the most beautiful things that often happens when I do events and I get the chance to interact with fans, is they say something beautiful when they come up to the table. They'll say, thank you, this book changed my life. Or they'll say, thank you, this means so much to me. And I'll respond, I'll say, thank you so much. Like, why? What happened? And I can't tell you, Sean, the number of times that people say, because before I read it, I felt alone. And they thought they were the only one wondering if there's something on the other side of the abyss. They thought they were the only one feeling fear about taking a step into the abyss. And so I think very often we are operating within our own mind and we want to find that courage. But again, we think we're the only one facing a situation like this. And so to me, I think the reason that the cafe works so well for people energetically is because they realize they're not alone, that others are asking these big questions about life and others are facing similar challenges, and that it's okay to feel that fear. It's also okay to take that step anyway.
Makes me think of in your book, the original, The Cafe on the Edge of the World, where the protagonist, John, I wonder who that's based on.
Yeah. Coincidence? No.
Yeah, is in that restaurant. On the menu are those three questions, which I think as an existential, someone who really loves to talk about life, I think those are three questions that we don't often ask. In fact, most people never really ask themselves. And they are, why are you here? Do you fear death? And are you fulfilled? Can you answer those three questions now as John Strzelecki?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And it's only really because I did take a step into the abyss and find my way to the path on the other side. The question, why am I here, is truly one of the most important and most profound questions you can allow yourself to ask. So I am here now to create what I call museum day moments for myself and for others. And museum day is from a concept that I wrote about in another book called The Big Five for Life. But the short version of that story is that imagine if your entire life is recorded, and at the end of your life, a museum is going to be built to show your life exactly how you lived it. And so if 80% of your life was at a job that you didn't like or spent on time that things that you didn't enjoy, then literally that will be 80% of your life museum, is showing these things, you being unhappy. And to the contrary, if you loved spending time with your family or your friends or a particular hobby, but for whatever reason, you only spend 2% of your life on those loves, then only 2% of your museum will be dedicated towards that. Imagine if heaven or the afterlife, or however your personal belief system goes in terms of what happens after this, imagine if you're the tour guide for your own museum for all of eternity. And so my purpose, why am I here, is to create museum day moments, beautiful moments that someone would love to walk in their museum for all of eternity, again and again and again. And I think anybody who allows themselves to follow their heart knows what that's like. Like, you can probably flip open your phone, Sean, and find some pictures, you and your family or you and your friends doing something that you're like, yeah, I would love to revisit that wing of that museum like 1,000 times, because it's just such a great moment.
What would be one object that you would definitely want to put into your collection?
It's funny because ever since I came up with that idea, and I wrote the book before I had my daughter, but then as my daughter was growing, I kept certain things to remind me of certain moments. And as you're asking that question, one just flashed into my head. When she was really little, she was probably like 2 years old, and she had these little dinosaur pajamas, and little dinosaurs on the pajamas would glow in the dark. And when she grew out of those pajamas, I kept them in a memory box. And every time I look at them, I'm brought back to all those amazing moments that we had when we would wrestle and we would read together when she was super little. And it's a great conduit to the memories, which I think is the important thing.
Right. I'm thinking of what I would put in there myself. I think it's a great question. It's a great thought exercise. I think I would put there is this jigsaw puzzle, this huge 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle that my kids and I put together over the course of many, many days. And I still remember there was a period of time where every day after dinner, we would say, oh, let's just find 2 or 3 pieces to put in there. And then, next thing you know, it's bedtime. 2 hours have gone by. We are completely in the zone. We found maybe like 10 or 20 pieces.
Yeah.
Right. And when we finished that 1,000 piece, like, we just sat back and just looked at it and we just said, you know what, we're going to see this picture in our sleep.
Yeah.
And I think it's just the fact that we finished it all together as a family, and there were such quiet moments of just working intently, like, together. It makes me almost think of like sewing circles, like I've never joined a sewing circle, but what I would imagine like a sewing circle being,
Yeah.
where everyone's kind of like deep in thought, like, looking for their own little pattern, but then together.
I like that. It sounds like the perfect amount of thinking and talking where nobody feels compelled, but when they feel the moment is right, then they're articulating or laughing or doing whatever.
Right. Now, do you have a favorite museum, John?
You mean an actual museum?
Yeah,
or museum?
actual museum.
I love museums. I love natural history in particular. And the reason I love them
New
so
York,
much.
The one in New York?
New York is a great one, yeah. And the reason I love them so much is there's so much about life that I don't know. And walking through a natural history museum, you learn about space, you learn about geology, you learn about chemistry. And so I just find it totally fascinating to walk through and see and think to myself, I literally would need 50 lifetimes to understand even a tenth of all this that I'm seeing. And I just think that's cool. It's very humbling and very inspiring. And if you look at the way the brain functions, what gives us a dopamine fix? A dopamine fix comes from many different things, but one of them is learning something new and growing in some capacity. And so to me, the knowledge that all of that is out there if we decide to pursue it is very inspiring.
Right. Brings back memories. My favorite museum is the American Museum of Natural History.
Okay.
You know, in New York. And as a kid growing up, my father's a painter. And so sometimes he would go to the museum because they have these great dioramas, right? With those stuffed animals, you know, stuff that's in like, you know, real, like well done. And he would go and do sketches of birds and various different kinds of animals. And so he would sit there for hours. And we would go on this one night in the week when usually, the museums closes at 5, but it would close at 9. But most people actually don't know it. So after about 5:30, there's no one left in the museum. So I would go with him and I will wander the halls of the museum by myself. That was some of the fondest memories in my life, is wandering those halls, not even really looking at exhibits, but just seeing, just the amazing amount of diversity that's out there.
Yeah.
And if we can imagine our life becoming an exhibition and having some child wander through, being like, I wonder what that is.
Yeah. Would they be excited? Would they be like, that's so cool? Or would they be like, this is boring?
He's got a lot of frequent flyer miles.
Oh, look, another boardroom, another hotel room, another boardroom. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's not the museum that you want to create for yourself, then there's something wrong with it. And that's kind of the experience that I had. Right. It's interesting hearing you describe that, because it sounds like the ultimate adventure as a kid. You don't quite have the freedom and flexibility and the life experiences where you're going to be out there traveling on your own to these destinations. And so how cool that you get to get just a taste of them through this museum, and to be able to do it when the halls are kind of dark and you get to run around on your own. Like, everything about that sounds pretty darn amazing as a kid.
I know. It's just, it's by far my favorite museum. But at the same time, so recently my family took a vacation to Spain, and we went to the Prado Museum, which is their national museum, right? Amazing museum, one of the best collections of art in the world. But it is definitely a very dark museum. The collection is dark, because it is basically a sovereign collection, right? It's a collection that was made by the kings since like the 15th century. And a lot of it are religious sort of paintings that really kind of describe a lot of the, so if you can imagine the like the gates of hell, or a lot of the Delacroix and things like this. And I just remember walking through, and I'm like, wow, the way that people look at life can be so different in the different eras of life, because during that era, for the kings, it was considered kind of like a, very worldly and very pious to collect these images to remind themselves of the suffering, of the darkness of life, right? So at the same time that I think we would love our collection, our museum, to be full of nice, happy objects, right? I wonder whether there would be a hall of the dark curiosities. Would there be in your museum, John?
I think that every human, as we're progressing through the human experience, is learning and questioning and wondering. And so, in the midst of the uncertainties, it does feel dark. And, it's going back to when you're a kid, when you don't know certain things, it feels scary at times and uncertain. And yet that's how we grow. I've often shared with people who are afraid to go on an adventure that every adventure you go on makes it easier to go on the next adventure. And so once you've done whitewater rafting, it's easier to go the second time. Once you've ridden subways in New York, it's much easier to ride a subway in Tokyo or in another city, so Rome or somewhere else. And so sometimes it's about like, and this isn't the void, this is more, it's stepping into the uncertainty and allowing yourself to maneuver through the fears, to maneuver through the questioning of, am I capable of this? Because on the other side of that, you always are stronger. You're always more knowledgeable. You're always a little bit better adapted to then handle the next thing that you come across. And so I interviewed an Olympian one time, and I remember she shared something with me that was so powerful. So she was always about winning and had been. And so she was struggling with just, you can't win every time, right? And so she and her coach came up with a good motto, and she shared this when I was interviewing her, and I thought it was so beautiful and so powerful. And it was, I'm either winning or I'm learning. And so, yeah, you're going to have moments in life where you've won. It's everything that you wanted it to be. The adventure went exactly as you hoped. But if you didn't win, well, that's okay, because what did you learn in the process that's going to enable you to win the next time?
That reminds me of a conversation that I had with the Taiwanese Olympic gold medalist for weightlifting, for women's weightlifting, Guo Xingchun. And she had just won her gold medal, so she was, very excited. And I had this great conversation with her. And then after we turned off the camera, I asked her just on the fly, like, so what's next? And she paused for a long time, and she said, actually, I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
And I think, for someone who has dedicated their life in pursuit of excellence, and now they got the gold medal, which is, in the Olympics, I mean, you're the best in the world.
Yeah.
Right? So what would be your purpose? What's next for you? And I like to ask this because I think all of us, even though we're not searching for Olympic gold, we're all going for goals, right? A lot of us are goal driven. So what happens after you've got that shiny object, after you've got that promotion? How do you gather yourself to find the next thing? Is life a series of progressively harder goals, or is there one big thing that would define your purpose?
Yeah, to me, going back to the museum day concept, I don't think it's necessarily about always having another big higher goal. I think it's just about enjoying the curiosities that cross your path. So think about when you were that little kid running through the museum, you were fascinated by the Native American Indians. You may have been fascinated by the African animals. You may have been fascinated by the pottery from a particular culture or the headdresses. And so I wouldn't consider that to be a increasingly harder and harder and harder thing, as much as it is you're very curious. And so once you know what it's like to sleep in an Indian village, then you might be like, oh, and now I'm curious to see what it's like to go to Africa and see the animals in the wild. And so following those callings as opposed to always climbing another level. I'm not sure that's everybody, because just like you were talking about this Olympic gold medalist, maybe for her that it is the pursuit of the absolute championship level. But I can tell you, as an author who has had the great luxury, the great joy of being the best in my field in a particular moment. So that for authors, that's like you're number one on the bestseller list. And when you've hit that, that is as high as you can go in that given week, right? And then when you're there for 3 weeks and 4 weeks and a year and then 2 years, you start to realize that it is really about appreciating the day in, day out of the experience, not just getting to that sort of lofty level. So yeah, that'd be my takeaway, is to see why it means something to you.
Right.
And then make sure you're still enjoying the reasons why it was supposed to mean something to you.
A lot of us actually, especially in Asian culture, very pragmatic. Right. A lot of people, one of the phrases that I think a lot of young people hear the most is, oh, Mom, I want to be a professional gamer. I want to be a YouTuber, or I want to be something. And the parent would say, how can you make a living out of that? Right. 这有没有办法当饭吃？就是 can you eat rice with that? Right. So a lot of I think it's almost the job of a lot of parents to sort of, rain on their kids' parade, to sort of rein them in a little bit, because they think that letting their imagination run wild might lead to lost time. What would be your answer to that?
I think understanding the drivers behind why you do what you do is one of the key variables for whether or not you're actually going to be successful at it. Stay happy while you're doing it. And so if you've got a kid who says, I'm very interested in becoming a gamer, the first question I would ask is why? And so is it because they see that that's a life of adventure? Okay, that I can build on,
Yeah.
If they said it simply because that's the best way to make money, I'd be a little worried, to be honest with you. Not that they couldn't do it and not that they wouldn't necessarily be able to make money at it, but simply because if they got to that point, they might feel very empty with the result. And so I'm looking more for a heart connection. But I always say to people, it's the number of people who know what I do for a living and still say to me things like, oh yeah, you can't make any money as an author. You can't make any money in the arts. I'm like, okay, but like my entire livelihood is based on the fact that I am an author and I've done okay. So
Yeah.
to me, it's about the reason why you're doing it. That's the
Right.
key question, you know?
Right.
And then I also have another philosophy that I use, which is if you're going to do something with the hopes of being successful at it, the more you enjoy whatever the activity is, the far greater the chances that you're going to be successful.
Yes.
And if you love it, you're going to put in the extra hours, you know, you're
Yeah.
going to do the due diligence necessary to get smarter at it, to get faster, to get better. If you don't love it, no matter how good of a quote unquote career path it is, I don't know. I just don't see how you can compete with someone who actually loves it. So I'd
Right.
rather suggest to a younger person, do something that you love, find 5 people who are doing it, who are successful, learn everything you can about those people, and look for patterns in the way that they got to be who they are, and then start imitating those patterns while still staying true to your heart. And if you do that, the odds are really, really good you're going to be successful.
Oh, that's a great how-to.
Thank you.
So take the 5 people that you really look up to in that field and then study them and try to emulate what they do.
Yeah, look for patterns. So did they
Look for
all, are there elements that are common across all 5? So
Okay.
if like, for example, in the in the gaming or the creative development space, did they all start young and go ahead and start creating content even though they weren't famous already? Or did they do a lot of collaborative partnerships early on? But look for patterns in the way that they approach this and what led them to be successful. And then yes, like that's some of the roadmap just mapped out for you. That is you being able to see over the abyss to clearly see the path on the other side because somebody has already crossed for you. And once you understand that, then you can with confidence start walking a path, as opposed to what I often see people get stuck with is they go left and then they go right and then they go left again and then they go do circles for a while and they aren't sure what to do. They're not positive they can do it. And that is what wastes time.
John, I think we're having this conversation. It's in a very relevant time because I think for this generation, we're definitely facing a crisis of meaning. I think a lot of young people are finding it increasingly hard to really find their place in the world, but at the same time, they're being asked to find their place in the world earlier and earlier.
So true.
You know, almost like you have to find your passion before you graduate high school. You know, otherwise, you know, college it won't look good on college essay. You know?
Yeah.
and I know you have an 18-year-old. So how do you play? I mean, do you try to coach your child?
100%. We have great relationships and have a great dialogue about these things. And I do see the stress that she goes through with some of these things.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's the part of me who is the age that I am, which says to her in the most calm and quiet and loving way that I can, don't worry about it. You know, like you'll find your thing. And at the same time, I don't want to diminish the actual stress that she's under, knowing that this is the way the system is operating right now. You're 100% right. She just did her college applications and she's waiting to hear now.
Yeah.
And you have 4 years worth of effort that basically is being determined by one essay and one test. And that's ridiculous to me.
Right.
But at the same time, I know that's not true, Sean. Like, I know that like there's a million ways to become a millionaire. There's a million ways to be successful. And so this is one potential hurdle that she will overcome, but it is not going to be the defining thing in her life. That's the piece of life wisdom that I try and impart with her is don't let it get you.
It's, you know, so my daughter's 15 and I was just having this conversation with her literally right before we started talking because she's really stressed out about her homework today. And I just said to her, I said, you know, there's more to life than grades. And your father and your mother, we're not going to push you to get like the best grades, really, because it's really what you do with what you learn that's really important.
Yeah.
And she just gave me this look.
The dad you don't understand look?
The dad, like, I know what you're saying, but there's nothing you can do about it kind of look. Right. And I think a lot of the kids are stuck in this right now because is the competition among peers, right?
sure.
There's always that meme of like, things that I wish I knew in my 20s or things that I wish I knew in high school, right? And obviously one of these things that we would love to tell our children is grades really don't matter that much,
Totally.
right? Or it's really what you learn is really the passion that you bring to learning. But when they are in that grind, right? And so if we're extending this outward and we're looking at a bunch of people and everyone's stuck in this grind and everyone's competing with their cohort, right? How do you pull them out of the matrix? John, how are you going to swoop in and pull them out of the matrix, right? I mean,
Yeah.
besides your book, I mean, your book is a great window into an alternative. But now, if you see a child who just put down your book at a cafe,
Mm-hmm.
and they're looking out the window, and you walk up to them, and you can sort of tap them on the shoulder and be like, "Hi, I'm the author of this book, and I would like to say something to you."
Yeah. In that scenario, what I would love to do is to
Yeah.
slide a piece of paper in front of them and maybe just walk out at that point. But I would love to have the conversation. But there's a piece of me, which the scene in the movie that you just described, if it was a movie,
Yeah.
I would slide a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper, it would say, "Someone is going to live your dream life. It might as well be you."
Love it.
Yeah.
Might as well be you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone's going to, yeah. Yeah. And a phrase that I like to say, not as positive, not as affirming, is you have to make choices in life, because if you don't, then choices will be made for you.
That's a great one. Yeah, that's a great one. And I think that kids who are struggling, so because they struggled, they don't do. Like they either go left, right, left,
Right,
right.
they
and
don't
therefore,
do.
they don't really make any
Right.
progress, or they sort of stay in that tight little circle.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. I think the big takeaway there is it's better to try and make a mistake and learn from the mistake than
Right.
to not try at all. You're just not going to grow if you don't try. And I think in our society today, there is tremendous unnecessary pressure on kids to try and get it perfect. When I was in school, the understanding and the expectation was like nobody is good at everything. But I find now with kids that if you're a smart kid, the expectation is you'll get all A's. But that's ridiculous. If you look at the way brains are structured, it makes perfect sense that someone might be ridiculously creative, but that doesn't mean they're also good at physics. And if someone's great at physics, odds are they aren't necessarily good at being creative either. And so I think one of the things that any young person should understand is that play to your strengths. You don't have to be great at everything. As a matter of fact, when you look at the people who are most successful, they are spectacular in whatever their chosen area is. And it's okay that they're not spectacular in the other things. And so do it because you enjoy it. Learn more about it because you genuinely enjoy the process of learning. And that will put you way ahead of your peer group. Don't worry about being great at everything.
Yeah. And maybe you try to answer some of the big questions, such as, in your book,
Yeah.
in the original, the 3 questions were, why are you here? Do you fear death? And are you fulfilled? So in your new book, Return to the Cafe on the Edge of the World, there were 3 new questions.
Yeah.
And we're gonna leave it a bit of a mystery for people to find out what those 3 questions are. If you want to know, then go and read the book. But I kind of want to go a little bit into your PFE. You have your thesis about the PFE. Can you share with us your thoughts on that?
Sure. Purpose for existing. And
Yeah.
show statistically every human gets about 28,900 days. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but statistically you'll get about 28,900 days. And the question is, what are you going to do with those days? And why are you going to do those things? And that interestingly circles back to those 3 questions in the cafe menu in the first book. So why am I here? In order for you to articulate a path that you want to walk for those 28,900 days, it's really worth asking that question. Well, why am I here? Am I here to be an adventurer? Am I here to help people? Am I here to be an adventurer who helps people?
Yeah.
You can combine those things together. And so allowing yourself to get very clear about the type of person that you are, the type of life that you want to live, and why you want to live it is fantastic. And the reason the second question is on the menu, do you fear death, is because in truth, I don't believe we fear dying. What we fear is getting to the end of our life, looking back and realizing that we haven't really lived it. That to me would be just the ultimate horrible day. You've lived your entire life. You've listened to everybody else's input. You played by everybody else's rules. You did what everybody else told you to do. And then you yourself at the very end are thinking to yourself, I missed it. Like I missed out. Here I had this tremendous opportunity and all I have is a museum full of stuff that other people wanted me to do.
Ooh.
That would be a tragedy. That
Yeah.
would definitely be a tragedy.
Oh, spending your whole life collecting stuff for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that ties
Ooh.
into the third question. Are you fulfilled? Because it's not enough to ask yourself the question, why am I here? And then ask yourself, and then in order to feel like you could get to the end with no fear of dying, it's, did you do it? You know, to actually take the steps in the direction that you wanted to go. That's what enables you to be fulfilled. And so it's, it's an amazingly cool experience, this life concept is.
Amazingly cool experience, this life concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. My son just came back from soccer practice. Hello,
Oh, nice.
Lucas. Yeah. So a little bit more about your new book. In your new book, you talk about how the universe isn't just listening.
Mhm.
It's watching what we do.
Yeah.
Kind of almost like an algorithm.
Yes. Yes.
So, okay. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I think that's fascinating. And I do agree with that. I mean, is this your worldview? I mean, what gave you this conclusion?
It's so fascinating, Sean. We live on a planet where there are things happening all around us that we're not aware of, but they're happening anyway. So there are magnetic fields that are formed because 3 layers down from the Earth's crust is flowing magma, not the top magma that you think of when you think of a volcano, but below that there's a level. And I believe it's iron and nickel, if I remember correctly. And it's fluid. And because the Earth is spinning and because we're spinning around the sun, this creates a magnetic field. Now that magnetic field is actually projected outside of the Earth's atmosphere. And it's a really good thing that it is, because if it wasn't, the 90 tons of stuff that is coming off of the sun and solar winds would destroy the Earth's atmosphere, and it would be impossible for life to exist on Earth. We don't think about this on a given day. This is happening. It is the guiding presence for birds to migrate. There is a species of bird that will fly for 11 straight days from Alaska to New Zealand, nonstop, 11 straight days nonstop, to an island in the middle of the ocean, which is New Zealand. And it knows how to do that because it is navigating along these magnetic poles. And that is one of a dozen easy examples that I could give you of things that are going on all around us that we don't think about, but they're still impacting our lives. And to me, one of the biggest of all time is what I call the cosmic algorithm of the universe. And this is that, and we know algorithms. If you've ever used Google, Google is an algorithm. If you get on Google and you type in purple cows and you type that in 50 times, pretty soon Google is going to start feeding you information about purple cows. There will be pictures, there will be auditory files, there will be videos all about purple cows. And in my experience, in that same, like picture that same thing, but it's happening in everyday life too, that the underpinning energy of existence is looking at the way you spend your time. It's looking at the thoughts that you have. And that's the equivalent of typing into the search engine. And so the more you do, the more thoughts that you think, the more you're alerting the cosmic algorithm to this is what's important to me. And therefore you get more of that back because the algorithm is looking and saying, well, you know, John and Sean are creatures of free will. They could do anything in this life. Clearly, they would pick things that bring them emotions like joy, happiness, love, compassion. And so whatever they're doing must be bringing them those emotions or they wouldn't be doing them. It wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. And therefore, since that's what they're picking, I will give them more of that. And so this is where it gets really interesting. Just like the Google algorithm would feed you tons of information about purple cows because that's what you keep typing in. Whatever we're spending our time on, whatever we're allocating our emotional and mental energy to is the equivalent of putting into the algorithm, this is what I want more information about. This is what I want to spend my time on. And so if you're not careful, and this is something that I've had to learn over time, then the inputs you're putting into the system are generating the outputs that you don't want from the system. The good news is that if you change the inputs, you change the outputs. And so by being conscious about the way you're spending your time, by being conscious about the thoughts that you're thinking and the ways that you're acting, you can change the life that you're getting back from the algorithm, the opportunities that you have. Because here's a crazy thought, Sean. What if coincidence and luck are not at all random? But what if coincidence and luck are actually the results of the algorithm?
I think some of those people who won the lottery and then lose it all in 2 years would, I wonder how many of them would actually say that was a real learning experience.
Yeah. I mean, I have no idea. This is the interesting thing about life is that generalities are tough to do. Specifics are easy. And so to take a look at your own life and say at a particular phase of my life, what was I doing? What was I thinking about? Where was I focusing my mental energy? Where was I focusing my financial resources? And was I getting back the type of things that I was putting into the system? And when I look back in my own storyline, the answer is yes, time and time and time again. And so just like finding 5 people and picking the patterns and noticing that and then emulating it, to me, looking back in your life and picking 5 times when you were activating the algorithm in a beautiful way and getting good things out of it is a good way to then focus on how you want to act going forward in your life. And you can do the same with the bad things too, but it's useful to focus on what went well and why it went well.
Definitely. Are you a believer in the simulation hypothesis?
Yeah. I'm like 50-50 that this whole thing is a giant simulation, I tell you. Yeah.
It'd be a glitch in the matrix sometime. You see like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah. Let's put it this way. If you were to design a system, this is like super theoretical physics, but if you were to design a system, the perfect system for growing the universe, to me, this is it. Like we're in the middle of it. Because you wouldn't just put one entity out there experiencing. You would split yourself into billions of entities, in all different life forms too. You'd have humans, you'd have spiders, you'd have dolphins, you'd have all this stuff. And all of these creatures, plants, everything, every living creature would be out there experiencing life in all its multifaceted forms. And it would be feeding all the inputs back into the database of knowledge. Like that would be the ultimate design. That is basically what we're in the middle of here. And so I do think there is a reason that all of this exists, whether it's a simulation designed to gain knowledge or whether it's actually happening, but somehow contributing to the collective consciousness. I don't know the answer to that one yet. But I do think that when you step back from it all, you say, yeah, there's definitely something going on that is bigger than just randomness, bigger than just I got my 28,900 days and then I'm going to die at the end.
I think what an awesome algorithm the universe is. And when we think of it this way, right? That all of us are existing in it as a potentially like a little microchip.
Yes.
To figure out, a little microchip on this huge motherboard that is trying to figure out the life itself.
Yeah.
Or perhaps the universe trying to figure itself out. I mean, that's potentially one way of looking at it.
Totally.
In which case, then, I think every single meeting, every interaction that we have has the potential of yielding some answers or perhaps localizing some of the energies of the search, of the algorithm. So, okay, coming up on the end of our podcast, I'd like to do 2 things, all right? One is that, so there's this group of cards that I designed, right? And these cards, they have different questions on them, right? And I'm just going to pick one at random, all right? And and we'll both answer them.
Perfect.
Just totally random. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, this one I think is pretty easy. What's something that always cheers you up, even on a tough day?
I don't want to seem redundant, but talking to my daughter.
Yeah, me too. I don't want to seem redundant, but me too.
It just is. So, yeah.
And I guess that answers the follow-up question, which is, do you think this will work for other people as well? Well, it certainly does for me.
I 100% think so. I will throw one additional one if you don't happen to have a kid or you're not at that phase of your life, and that is music. And so music is so powerful because it involves so many elements of your brain that you don't even realize you're involving. And the reason it works is because well-constructed music has, especially sort of high-energy music, has a particular rhythm to it that drops beats. And what's cool about this is your brain will release dopamine
Yeah.
with the expectation of happiness,
Yeah.
with the expectation of figuring something out.
Right.
And so when you're listening to really well-designed music, the artist who designs it, whether they know it or not, are leading you to a special moment in the song where the beat will be dropped. Your brain picks up on that cue way before the beat actually drops. And so you get a hit of dopamine twice.
Yeah.
And so the first hit
Right.
of dopamine comes because it's anticipating the drop.
Right.
And the second hit happens because you actually hit the music where it drops the beat.
Ooh.
And what's crazy cool about this is that happens even if you know the song or don't know the song. But if you do know the song, you get another boost on top of that when you listen to it again, because now you actually already know what's coming. And so you're anticipating the anticipation. And so it took me a long time to figure this out, but music is one of the greatest ways to shift your emotional state. And whether you use it to calm down or whether you use it to get yourself energized, depending on the type of music, over 140 beats a minute will get you excited. Less than 60 beats per minute will calm you down. But it is a phenomenal tool. And with our smartphones, you're never without it.
As a DJ of over 25 years,
Oh,
I fully resonate with that.
Yeah.
Any particular song on your playlist right now that you can recommend for us?
Oh, it depends on my mood for sure.
Something that lifts you up.
Yeah, Warrior. If I need a song that just like picks me up, Imagine Dragons' Warrior. That song.
Imagine Dragons Warrior. Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready to like jump into the fray as soon as I hear that song. It's just so well constructed, so well crafted. Yeah.
Yeah.
You?
It is. It has that war song to it. You know, I have different ones, but recently, just, because YouTube, the algorithm, it plays, and I started watching DJ sets by this guy called Lane 8.
Okay.
I think he's based out of somewhere in the States, like Houston or something. Is a producer. Denver, that's where it's from. Amazing harmonic, melodic house. Talk about, the build-up and having really, really gigantic, long, epic build-ups that just gives you goosebumps, You're like, oh, I'm going to get there. The drop is going to happen.
Yes.
Yeah. Full-on dopamine ride.
And
His
there's
latest
something
album
about harmonies that add to that. I can think of so many songs, I can't necessarily think of the names, but so many songs that I can hear in my head right now. And what you're talking about, where it's the lead up, and especially for me, it's a harmonization without music behind it. And all of a sudden you're just like in another place.
Yeah.
But I will drop one more song on you. I came across it recently. It's by Bon Jovi. It's a song I had never heard of before, and I've loved their music for a long time. But the song is, Do You Want to Make a Memory? And the lyrics in that song are so beautiful. I listen to it all the time on my phone just because it just takes me to another place when I listen to it.
Do You Want to Make a Memory by Bon Jovi. I'm going to go and look that up.
The follow-up line in that song is, Do you want to steal a piece of time? Which I just think is just absolutely brilliant.
Wow. That could be the title of a book.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of the essence of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
When you spend time doing the puzzle with your kids, you're stealing a piece of time. It's yours. Like nobody can ever take it away from you. And you will have that memory for the rest of your life. It becomes a permanent part of your museum. And I just think it's a beautiful line, captures the whole essence of so much of what I think about and believe in life.
That's great. That's beautiful. And in that case, I would certainly want to be a little more selfish and steal a lot of little bits of time for myself.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the whole point, Sean. I think if you look at life as an entity, I think it's a game. I really do. Whether it's a simulation or reality, I don't know, but I do think it's a game. And the question is, how do you win the game of life? You steal as many minutes of time as you can. Because you've only got 28,900. The clock is ticking, whether you like it or not. Time, you can't store it. Like once your minutes are gone for the day, they're gone. You don't get them back. You can't get them back no matter how much money you have. And so the trick is to be present, to really appreciate the minutes while you have them, to capture them, to steal them and record them and put them in your museum. And it's the things that make you smile. And if you can do that with the people that you care about and love, you're totally winning the game of life.
Well, John, with that, I really thank you for sharing the 60 minutes out of your, 28,000, hopefully actually more, hopefully we'll reach, more like 30,000 and
there you
above.
go.
but sharing with us your precious time and I really enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoyed we kind of touched in a lot of different places, which I think is really the only way to go about talking about a book of literature, fiction. It's to build a world, to have people really imagine how life can be, right? So Return to the Cafe at the Edge of the World. It asks some really deep questions. So really it's about asking yourself. And ultimately, the one thing that I have a takeaway from today's conversation is take action. Don't just sit there and imagine. Take action, because that's how the next thing is going to happen. And perhaps the universe is watching.
Yeah.
And perhaps your action is going to create the feedback loop that's going to generate the next thing that's going to build the life that you want. So last question. I have a social media group where we try to actionize many of the how-tos given by our guests. Do you have something that we can do?
We talked about a couple of good ones along the way, but let me think.
Go listen to Bon Jovi?
Well, I do love the idea of coming up with a short playlist that is the thing that just takes you to a different emotional state.
Oh, that's pretty nice.
Yeah. And maybe that would be an interesting one, actually. So let's think of what the emotions would be. Something that inspires you to take action. So I would say if you're going to attach an emotion to that, something that makes you feel strong and courageous. So one song of the playlist that does that. I would say one song of the playlist that makes you feel immersive. And so something that makes you feel part of something bigger than just your own story, whatever that is. And then let's see, what would be one more good category? Because I'm an adventurer, I would say something that feels adventurous. So one gives you courage, but the other one is, it's different than courage. It makes you feel like you're ready to throw on a backpack and go see the world, whatever that is to you.
Or it tests the boundaries of your zone of comfort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. Something a little experimental, maybe a little edgy.
Yeah, exactly. Something I like that, pushing the boundaries a bit.
Okay.
That'll actually be some really interesting dialogue. I'm sorry I'm not going to be in that dialogue, because I would love to hear what people's reasons are for picking those songs, because I know it's going to be amazing. I love the story behind the story in life, and that conversation will be all about the story behind the story.
I'll share with you their playlists.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Yeah, we'll gather up all the playlists. I'll email them to you.
Nice.
Yeah. In fact, you could give a couple of comments on it. Maybe we could, we will definitely hear a lot of cool new music that way.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Well, thank you so much, John. And it's great talking to you. And I hope that one day our paths will cross, maybe in Taiwan, at one of your future book signings. Hopefully, you'll get to Taiwan sometime.
That'd be great. Look forward to going back there. It's an amazing country full of amazing people.
Yeah. All right. So take care, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you, John. 以上就是我与 John Strzelecki 的对话。他的新书《重返世界尽头的咖啡馆》（Return to the Cafe on the Edge of the World） 已经在台湾上市喽，由三彩文化出版。那相关的书籍资讯与连结，我们都会放在今天的节目资讯栏，提供给各位参考。如果你喜欢今天这一集，欢迎订阅我们的频道，也欢迎把这集分享给你身边可能正需要这段对话的人。你的留言、你的评价，都是支持我们继续把这样的对话带给更多人的力量。在所有的 Podcast 平台以及 YouTube 都可以搜寻到我们的节目。我也会努力邀请更多重量级、有影响力的来宾来到节目上，分享他们的人生哲学，让我们一起探讨 How to 活出更缤纷富足的人生。感谢你的收听以及收看刘轩的 How to 人生学，我们下次见。